Mike Macdonald has given Geno Smith another vote of confidence going into Super Bowl weekend. What's going on, everybody? Good morning. It is Super Bowl weekend now. Happy Saturday. One more day until the Super Bowl. I am going to do a video or two concerning the Super Bowl. I know that obviously the Seahawks are not in it, and the Seahawks don't really have a rival in it either, so the stakes for a Seahawks fan, from a Seahawks fan perspective, is relatively low, but we'll make a couple videos about it tomorrow. But before we get into more free agency stuff, which we will do later today, thought I'd go ahead and talk about some of the recent discussion topics in the Seahawks fandom. And the big one right now has to be this, because this actually pertains to the most important position and arguably the most pivotal player of the 2025 offseason for the Seahawks, Geno Smith. Not to say that anything concrete has happened, but Mike Macdonald got in an interview with Aaron Levine over the, I think this was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, but I think it was yesterday. And when asked about Geno Smith, he continued to be very supportive of him. The two quotes from the interview that stand out are, "We can win a championship with Geno Smith," and "I don't understand the conversation about whether he's going to be back with us. He's our quarterback." So that's pretty definitive. That sounds pretty firm to me. I think that some people were looking at his quotes right after the season ended, where he said something like, "He's our starter until he's not," and they took from that he was a little bit lukewarm on him, that he wasn't really into it. So I don't know if he made these statements because he knows how his previous statements were interpreted. I don't know if he thought that his previous statements were taken not in the way he intended and he wanted to be a little bit more clear this time. I don't know. But he was certainly more demonstrative this time in favor of Geno Smith. And for the record, I do agree with him on a fundamental level. I do agree that Geno Smith should be the quarterback of the team until it comes to a time where it makes sense to not. And for me, the decision on whether or not it made sense to keep him ended the moment you restructured Big Cat. If you didn't restructure Big Cat, then you could have maybe put together some kind of an offseason plan where you take a step back, you kind of kick the can down the road on 2025, and then you say 2026 is our year. You do that, you can have that conversation, but to me, there's no conversation anymore. You are now obligated to do everything you can to try to win as much as you can this season, and I'd say the window probably extends out into 2026 as well now. That's arguable, but you are not going to be winning a championship or getting anywhere close with any of these rookie quarterbacks you can get. You're not going to expect to have much success with any of the free agent quarterbacks you can go get. So you have one option, and it's Geno Smith. Anybody else is either your tank commander, quote unquote, for a throwaway year, or a bridge quarterback, or you just trying to buy a lottery ticket. So to me, that conversation that you were going to have about maybe saying, we're not ready to compete yet, so let's move Geno now and just kind of lay back and take it in 2025. That conversation's done because of the Leonard Williams restructure. So I do agree with him on that level, and I also agree with him in a more raw football sense that Geno Smith is very good, and given some of the quarterbacks that I've seen in recent years make deep runs in the postseason, not necessarily win, but make deep runs, I don't see why you can't make a deep run with Geno Smith. I mean, Jalen Hurts can barely throw the ball accurately more than 12 yards, and he's about to play in his second Super Bowl in 3 years. So don't tell me it can't be done. It's not easy. You would rather have the best quarterback in the league, but it can be done. So this sounds like a coach who is pretty into Geno Smith, who is pretty ready to roll with him in 2025. Now, there are a couple things to say here. I saw some people in my Discord saying, "Oh, well, that does it then. He's obviously coming back." And for the record, I do think he's coming back, but I thought that before this quote. It is worth noting that the Seahawks were speaking about Ryan Grubb in the final week of the regular season as if he was going to come back. Mike Macdonald spoke positively about Ryan Grubb the last week of the regular season, and then they fired him basically as soon as they could the day after the season ended. They knew they were going to fire him. They knew he was done, but they wanted to be complimentary. They wanted to be nice. They didn't feel the need to be mean to him while he was still working for the team. So they kept that under wraps. They kept that quiet, and they decided there was no need to rub his nose in it, right? He did a bad job. He had a bad year, but they can be professional about it. So him saying this does not mean that there's actually going to be a commitment there. It doesn't guarantee anything. If your priors before this interview were one thing, they probably shouldn't be moved too much by this. And also, it's worth noting, Mike Macdonald does not have final say on personnel decisions. John Schneider does. And at the end of the day, even if he did have personnel control, there's only so much he can do, right? Like, what if Geno Smith wants $50 million a year on his contract? There's really not much you're going to be able to do there if he's not willing to move down from that. And there does come a point where the price gets so high, you can't really do much of anything with it. So we have to be real with that possibility of needing to find a different way. And again, beyond that, John Schneider gets final say. And we don't know what John Schneider really thinks about Geno Smith. He has been generally vague. We know he's given him contracts before, including his current contract, so he likes him that much. But in terms of thinking that he is the guy, it's hard to know. And it should be hard to know, by the way. John Schneider should not be telling us, or really anybody, what he thinks. You keep that to yourself, and you make decisions based off your feeling, and you make decisions privately without giving away what you actually think. You don't let them see you bleed like that, because it gives away information you don't need to. All right, so that was definitely the main thing of interest that happened in the last day or so. This little interview snippet came out, and it got a lot of the fan base buzzing. You can look in the comments of this Nemhauser tweet, honestly, and you can scroll through it, and you can be like, oh yeah, this is getting people fired up. On one side or the other side. Some people obviously really don't like it. Some people are into it. And a lot of people would say, well, it doesn't really matter what he says or what he wants. He could believe that Geno Smith is a top 5 quarterback. That doesn't mean John Schneider does. That doesn't mean John Schneider is going to sign off on extending him. It's ultimately his call. So still plenty that needs to be seen coming together this offseason. There were a couple other things that I wanted to quickly throw in here while we are here having a little bit of time in this video. There is an interesting decision coming up in the next week or so. Uchenna Nwosu's deal, per Nemhauser, becomes guaranteed, $6 million of it, rather, becomes guaranteed next Friday, which is the 14th, so less than a week from now. Some places have the date as early as the 10th, which would be Monday. So either way, if there is going to be a decision on Uchenna Nwosu, we're going to hear about it very soon, in the next few days. So if there's going to be a restructuring, we're probably going to hear about it very soon. If he's going to be released, we're definitely going to have to hear about it soon, because once these $6 million in guarantees kick in, it's really hard to do anything. At that point, he's basically an ironclad lock to be on the roster. And my position is that Nwosu should stay on his current deal as is and come back and show what he can do in 2025. But I'm not married to it. I think restructuring him makes some sense, especially if you can get him to be very amenable to that restructuring. Maybe find some way to lower down cap hits with void years, or even releasing him. I think it's all on the table with Nwosu, and I don't think any of it sounds bad, but the point here is that it has to happen in the next few days, or else that $6 million becomes locked in, and at that point it is what it is. So that's most of the Seahawks news. There is one other thing I wanted to touch on. The Hall of Fame inductees for the NFL this year were announced, and only 4 people got in. 4 people got in. And Sterling Sharp got in, which was cool. I'm down with that 100%. That's awesome. No complaint there. One guy who did not get in was Mike Holmgren. This is getting silly, guys. Mike Holmgren has several Super Bowl rings. One as a head coach, others as an offensive coordinator. He has a coaching tree that includes Andy Reid and John Gruden. And go look at Andy Reid's coaching tree. All that stuff that spawned from Andy Reid, Sean McDermott, Nick Sirianni, Doug Peterson, that stemmed from Holmgren. Like, what does he need to do here? Okay, I'm not going to get into a whole tirade here because I already did it. This is a joke. All right? The NFL Hall of Fame is incomplete without Mike Holmgren. Andy Reid is one of the 5 greatest coaches in NFL history, and he learned under Mike Holmgren. He won his first Super Bowl as a quarterback coach under Mike Holmgren. Mike Holmgren might be the greatest offensive coordinator of all time from his days in San Francisco. Mike Holmgren came in, took control of a team that almost moved to Los Angeles and turned them. It took a few years, yeah, but he turned them into a perennial playoff team. We won the division, 4 or 5 years in a row with Holmgren? The Seahawks were considered to be the dregs of the NFL back in the 90s, and he came in and fixed that. So this I'm not happy about. I understand why Sean Alexander hasn't gotten in the Hall of Fame yet. I do. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. I understand why maybe 1 or 2 other Seahawks legends haven't gotten in, but this one's a joke because his accomplishments go way beyond what he did in Seattle. Green Bay and San Fran, give me a break. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.